Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thank you so much for starting your Thursday morning with us. And we're going to begin with the U.S. launching the second day of what the Trump administration is calling self-defense strikes on Iran. For its part, Iran is firing back at U.S. targets in the Middle East.
The new strikes come in response to that U.S. Army Apache helicopter that President Trump says was shot down by an Iranian drone. That happened earlier this week near the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command released this video. The military says the footage shows strikes on targets inside Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth did warn yesterday that U.S. forces would be attacking Iran. Now, in response to these new attacks, the Iranian military said the Strait of Hormuz would be closed off to all marine traffic. But U.S. Central Command said last night the strait was open. This after Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed it attacked 2 oil tankers in the strait. In a moment, we'll check in with NBC News military analyst Colonel Steve Warren. Let's begin, though, with NBC News correspondent Alice Barr, who is in Washington with the latest. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. While U.S. Central Command said the American military was responding to Iran's continued aggression, Iran's foreign ministry said this morning the new wave of strikes have rendered the ceasefire practically meaningless, raising concerns we could see a return to all-out war. The U.S. and Iran trading fire again overnight after President Trump made clear
we're going to be attacking them very hard.
U.S. Central Command said it completed attacks targeting Iran's military surveillance, communication systems, and air defense in response to Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
When someone's trying to tap on a deal, instead, they're going to have tap bombs dropping.
Iran fired back against U.S. allies in the Gulf, forcing Kuwait to temporarily close its airspace. Iran's Revolutionary Guard released this video Wednesday that NBC News cannot verify. Now, for a second day, Iran state media reporting attacks on U.S. bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It all follows Iran's downing of an American Apache helicopter and President Trump's post that Tehran had waited too long to make a deal and would now have to pay the price, even as he reasserted.
We want a deal that's meaningful. We want a deal that works.
The president also contending with a new report showing inflation hitting 4.2% in May, the highest in more than 3 years, driven largely by soaring fuel costs. The president downplaying the numbers that he said would drop when the war ends.
I love the inflation.
Later telling the New York Post he meant inflation is lower than anticipated despite the war, while he also revealed what he says was a secret mission to reduce energy costs, with the U.S. military guiding oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
We took out the other night 22 ships, late at night with no lights.
Saying they brought out more than 100 million barrels of oil. For context, 100 million barrels of oil covers roughly 5 days' worth of what Americans use and 1 day around the world. A U.S. official tells NBC News the American military has coordinated more than 200 transits, helping ships find a safe path through the Strait of Hormuz. Savannah and Joe.
Alice, NBC News also has some exclusive new reporting about defense industry leaders who are preparing to meet with President Trump amid some concerns about the American supply of missiles. What do we know about that?
Yeah, this new reporting from some of our NBC News colleagues found that the leaders of roughly 7 defense companies are expected to meet with President Trump at the White House as soon as this week and be pressed to find ways to quickly speed up production of weapons for the Pentagon. That's according to 3 sources familiar with the upcoming meeting. It does come amid concerns that missile supplies may be dwindling. A White House official, though, said there was no meeting with leaders of defense companies on the president's schedule at this time, and that the American military has what it needs to do the job, guys.
All right. Alice Barr, thank you.
Let's now bring in Colonel Steve Warren. He's an NBC News military analyst and former Pentagon spokesperson. Colonel, good morning. Thank you, as always, for being with us. So these latest strikes, they come just 24 hours after this first round. We're saying that it is this response to Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression, was what U.S. Central Command said. And then President Trump said yesterday that the U.S. would hit back hard again. What do you make of his strategy to telegraph these strikes, to talk about them before they happen?
Well, there's two things happening here at the same time, right, Savannah? Number one, the president, I believe, ran out of patience with the Iranians at the negotiating table. And simultaneously, the Iranians blundered by downing that Apache helicopter, whether it was intentional or accidental, one way or another. It gave the president good reason to begin striking. The president's telegraphing these strikes, I believe, because he does not want this to spiral completely out of control and become a return to all-out combat operations.
So, Colonel, after a briefing from CENTCOM, Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy said yesterday he doesn't believe that Iran's regime will make a deal. He also says that the only option left for the president is to decide whether troops will actually need to go into Iran to recover any nuclear materials. Do you think that's at all likely at this point?
Well, a mission to invade Iran and in order to gain control of those nuclear materials would be a massive mission. I won't say it's impossible, but I will say it's on the edge of impossible. This would be a very difficult, very costly and high-risk operation. I don't see the president willing to take these types of chances just for this nuclear material.
Colonel, let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran had said once again recently it closed it off and it claimed it attacked 2 oil tankers that were trying to pass through. U.S. Central Command has continued to say that they have the strait open. And then we have the president's comments yesterday about having helped some of these oil tankers sneak out of the strait in the dead of night, in the dark. What is really going on here?
Savannah, what's going on here is everyone is telling their own story, right? The Iranians are claiming this strait is closed, yet 200 ships have gone through, not exactly closed. The Americans, the president is saying the strait is open, but only at night and in secret. That's not exactly fully open either, is it? So everyone's still kind of jockeying here for position, whether it's informationally, tactically, or strategically, and it's all about whether or not we can get to the negotiating table and begin to make a deal.
All right, Colonel, as always, we appreciate your time.
Back here at home, it was another day of severe storms sweeping across the Midwest, spawning several tornadoes. That includes this funnel cloud, which was spotted tearing across Missouri yesterday. And in Wisconsin, the winds were so strong they ripped the roof off this apartment building. That forced residents to take shelter in the building's basement. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster has the latest from Chicago. Shaq, good morning.
Hi there, Joe and Savannah. Well, you're seeing the impact of that violent round of storms right here in downtown Chicago. I mean, look at this. This roof falling down off of one of these buildings onto some of these cars. Look at the impact that it had when it landed on the windshield of this car. You now see cleanup crews here doing what they can. And look, this is something that you're seeing across the area, not just here in Chicago, but really throughout the region. We have some video, I believe, of what you saw yesterday afternoon with this storm coming through. People running for cover, debris flying through the air. We know that a lot of this was connected to the wind and the wind speeds that you saw tied to this storm. Up in Wisconsin, we saw wind speeds being clocked in at 94 miles an hour. Just a dangerous system that also brought some tornadoes. In Missouri, we saw those menacing funnel clouds sweeping through fields, something similar that you saw in Iowa as well. A dangerous system that's continuing to move east and also brought a lot of rain. We saw drivers stuck in some of that flooding in Pennsylvania. Now, the problem is we're dealing with the threat of similar weather again today here in Chicago, for many states across the Midwest. The threat of more of those winds, more of the possible tornadoes. We know about 400,000 people across the country are waking up without power. Those power outages are expected to only increase with another round of this severe weather. And then you have to talk about what's going on out east. The temperatures are increasing. Heat advisories in effect later this week. The very likely possibility that we're going to be talking about some record-setting temperatures. But back to today, another round of storms hitting some major transportation hubs here in Chicago, New York, D.C. You could be seeing a lot of flight delays tied to this dangerous and violent severe weather. Joe and Savannah?
Busy day ahead, Shaq. Thank you.
Well, for more, let's bring in our friend Al Roker.
He's got a closer look at where things stand ahead of the weekend. Al, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. Well, we've got more severe weather again today. After yesterday's outbreaks, we're looking at more again. We've got severe thunderstorm watches, warnings, even some tornado warnings this morning as this first line starts to make its way in here. 92 million people at risk for dangerous weather. Intense tornadoes, wind gusts of over 75 miles per hour, damaging winds, Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago, Des Moines, Iowa. There are going to be big airport delays today in Chicago. They're going to ripple across the country. We've got a tornado risk from Saginaw, Michigan, down to Quincy, Illinois, EF0 to EF2 or greater tornadoes. Then tomorrow, that shifts to the east from Burlington, Vermont, down to Knoxville, Tennessee, New York City, 65 million people at risk, wind gusts of over 60 miles per hour. Tornado risk is low. That's the good news. We are looking at a lot of wet weather. Some places, hourly rainfall rates, 2 to 3 inches likely, especially as you get up into Chicago, Des Moines, Davenport, Iowa. And the heat is on. We are looking at records through tomorrow from Glens Falls, New York, all the way down to Columbia, South Carolina, Craig Melvin's hometown. Look at these temperatures. We're talking records, heat and humidity. Could be 98 degrees in Norfolk today. Same in Roanoke. Johnson City could tie a record at 92. Same for Bryson City. That heat and humidity continue all the way up the coast. It's going to feel like 94. The record today, 94 degrees in Manchester. Philly, 95. Could set a record today as well. Rest of the country, hot and humid here in the east. That severe outbreak in the mid-plains. And then hot and dry weather from Seattle all the way down to San Diego. Joe and Savannah, back to you.
All right, Al, thank you so much. In Washington, President Trump is claiming a major victory for his immigration agenda.
Yeah, flanked by top Republicans, the president signed the Secure America Act into law yesterday. The $70 billion in the bill funds ICE and Border Patrol through the end of his term. And the signing really brings an end to this months-long fight we've seen on Capitol Hill over funding for the Trump administration's immigration operations.
NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz joins us now with more on this. Megan, so this was the end of a truly long journey. It included a government shutdown, battles over ballroom funding. So break down what's actually in this law now.
Yeah, hey, Joe and Savannah, good morning. So as you mentioned, this is $70 billion to fund ICE and Border Patrol through the end of President Trump's term. And it comes after this months-long fight on Capitol Hill over the future of immigration enforcement funding. So I want to take you back to April. That is when lawmakers had passed a bill to reopen the Department of Homeland Security after that record-long shutdown, as you mentioned. That bill had funded most of the department, but it did not fund ICE. It did not fund Border Patrol. So the bill that was signed yesterday by President Trump did just that. Now, President Trump had signed that bill one day after House lawmakers had passed it very narrowly. The Senate had previously passed that through something that's called the reconciliation process, which is a budget process that allows the lawmakers, that allows Republicans to basically circumvent Democrats to pass that with a majority of votes instead of needing to hit that 60-vote filibuster-proof threshold. And so this bill as well had hit a snag when President Trump, too, had previously said that he wanted it to include that so-called anti-weaponization fund. That ultimately was not included in the bill after pushback from Democrats, but also Republicans as well, Joe and Savannah.
Megan, also we want to talk about housing official here, Bill Pulte. So President Trump, he's continuing to face backlash over the decision to put him here as acting director of national intelligence. This is after Tulsi Gabbard stepped down. He's a Trump loyalist, but he has no background in intelligence. This has really been making a stir in Washington. What are some of the concerns that lawmakers have about this choice, and what have we heard from the president?
Yeah, so Democrats have expressed a lot of concern about Pulte being appointed for a couple of reasons. One, as you mentioned, is the fact that Pulte is a housing official. He does not have a background in the intelligence field. Another reason is the fact that as Pulte has been a housing official, he has made multiple criminal referrals against political enemies of President Trump. People like New York Attorney General Letitia James, Senator Adam Schiff, accusing them of things like insurance fraud and mortgage fraud, for example, which they've denied the allegations that were made against them. But it's raising a lot of concerns from Democrats. So yesterday as well, House Intelligence Committee Democrats had wrote a letter to President Trump urging him to rescind Pulte's appointment. They wrote, and you can see on your screen, that Pulte has distinguished himself only as someone who will do or say anything to stay in your good graces, qualities that are precisely the opposite of what our nation needs in a DNI, meaning Director of National Intelligence. Now, President Trump yesterday had defended his pick of Pulte, telling NBC's Garrett Haake that smart people are smart people. And he also said that he'd rather have smart than experience, but experience is good too. Now, he also said that Pulte would be there for a short while as they're going to ultimately pick another candidate. And he said that they are interviewing about 5 other people ultimately for that post, guys.
Megan, one more headline that we've been following from Washington is that so-called anti-weaponization fund. The Attorney General, Todd Blanche, said the administration is now abandoning the plan. At the same time, it is still working its way through the courts. A federal judge weighed in yesterday, basically denying a bid by those who oppose the fund that would have temporarily stopped the administration from moving forward with the fund. So what does this all mean?
Yeah, that's right. So yesterday, a district judge had declined to temporarily block that fund. The argument basically being that he said that it was basically a moot point now that the administration has said that they're not going to move forward with that so-called anti-weaponization fund. Now, at the same time, that judge with a warning to the administration, warning them not to play possum with him, is how he put it. Now, that judge had also asked that Justice Department official during that hearing why the DOJ didn't just rescind the memo that had created that fund, rather than having the court and the public rely on the administration saying that they weren't going to move forward with that fund anymore. And that official said that he did not know the reason for that. So remember, this comes after Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche had said that the administration was no longer moving forward with that so-called anti-weaponization fund. That came after pushback from both Democrats as well as Republicans as well. I do want to note here, though, that there are a couple of lawsuits regarding that so-called anti-weaponization fund. And while this judge did not decline to temporarily block it, the anti-weaponization fund is still temporarily blocked by a different judge in a different lawsuit until at least Friday. And that is when there's going to be another hearing on this. It could ultimately be blocked even longer than that, Joe and Savannah.
All right, Megan, thank you so much.
Well, in other news from Capitol Hill, billionaire Bill Gates was questioned yesterday by members of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform over his connections to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Gates, who appears thousands of times in the Epstein files, faced more than 5 hours of heated questioning from both sides of the aisle behind closed doors. NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the latest.
Billionaire Bill Gates leaving Capitol Hill after accusing Jeffrey Epstein of blackmailing him. The Microsoft co-founder grilled by lawmakers over his ties to the notorious sex offender.
I hope my testimony is helpful to the important work of the committee to find justice for the victims.
Gates, who appears thousands of times in the DOJ's Epstein files, including in photos alongside women, says he met Epstein in 2011 to help raise money for his global health charities. Gates is referenced in emails Epstein appears to have drafted to himself in 2013, suggesting he helped Bill get drugs after sex with Russian girls, allegations Gates has denied. The Microsoft co-founder telling lawmakers he cut off Epstein when it became clear his philanthropic pledges were a dead end, but says Epstein became aware of his extramarital affairs and, in his words, was working to use information about my infidelities, in addition to many lies that he layered on top, to pressure me to re-engage with him. Gates says he never witnessed nor had any indication that Epstein was engaged in ongoing criminal conduct and never victimized anyone. He's not been accused of criminal wrongdoing. Gates' interactions with Epstein began years after a controversial sweetheart deal in which Epstein served just 13 months, including work release, on Florida charges including soliciting minors for prostitution. Gates saying he should never have met with Epstein in the first place.
Obviously, I think we would agree it was a horrific judgment call.
The Gates Foundation now doing its own investigation, and those in Gates' orbit unable to escape headlines about him, including his ex-wife, Melinda.
Brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage.
Our thanks to Hallie Jackson for that report. Well, earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal reported that Gates apologized to employees of the Gates Foundation for his past ties to Epstein during a town hall meeting.
The execution of a death row prisoner in Alabama scheduled for today has been halted. A federal appeals judge issued a decision permanently blocking the state from executing Jeffrey Lee through the use of nitrogen gas, citing the Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The Alabama State Attorney General now plans to appeal the decision. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has Lee's reaction to the judge's decision.
Sitting on Alabama's death row, Jeffrey Lee breathing a sigh of relief, at least for now, after a federal judge in a rare move blocked the state's plan to execute him with nitrogen gas.
You still just got to maintain your focus to continue to fight this.
The legal fight over Alabama's method of execution coming to a head now after a federal appeals court on Monday agreed with Lee's attorneys that the state's use of nitrogen presents a substantial risk of serious harm, severe pain over and above death itself, violating the Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. In an exclusive phone interview from prison, the 49-year-old sentenced to death for killing two people during a pawn shop robbery back in 1998, processing the news in real time.
I am not finished. And just, to me, my faith is everything. And kind of emotional right now.
The case now winding its way through the courts, with the latest judge now ordering the state to turn to an alternative method, such as lethal injection or a firing squad. But Alabama's Attorney General Steve Marshall has appealed, arguing supplies and staffing needed for those methods are more limited, and that Lee is just trying to delay justice, writing, "Lee knows it hurts to be shot. He shot Jimmy Ellis in the chest and Elaine Thompson in the head." Lee's case now drawing renewed attention to the state's use of nitrogen, as 8 men have been executed with the gas since 2024, while defense lawyers allege it induces conscious suffocation. Lee says despite his crimes, no matter what happens, he believes he will find redemption in heaven.
I'm not scared to die. I don't fear dying or nothing like that because I know where I will be.
Laura Jarrett, NBC News.
For more on this case, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, good to have you with us. And no surprise, we know the Alabama Attorney General is going to appeal this case. So where do things go from here?
Right back up to the 11th Circuit, which sent it down originally. And this is that ping-ponging process that's accelerated often in cases of execution because of the urgency. But even on appeal, Lee will face some serious obstacles. First, the Supreme Court, if it makes it to the Supreme Court, has generally upheld virtually every form of state execution. And in addition, nitrogen executions have already been allowed to go forward. And then thirdly, unfortunately for Lee, that the court has left open alternative methods of execution that Alabama could use. So if you're a betting person, and not to sound too grim or cavalier about it, James Lee, the odds are, will die and die soon.
To talk about some of the difficult details of something like this, a media witness to the last nitrogen execution, it was in October, described it as a prolonged process. What does that mean legally when you put it in the context of cruel and unusual punishment?
Right. So the Constitution, the 8th Amendment, prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. But that is not a fixed meaning from the 1700s, because as we all know, we were a little bit more barbaric a couple hundred years ago. But we can, and courts can, consider evolving standards of decency. The problem is, though, for this defendant, or for Lee, is that the court has generally upheld methods of execution, and it is a high burden to meet. Interestingly enough, one of the prongs of the test is whether there's a substantial risk of harm. Yeah, it's an execution. There's a massive risk of harm during an execution. That is kind of an odd element, but yet that is what the 8th Amendment and the test applied looks for.
So the ruling has blocked nitrogen gas executions in Alabama. Laura sort of laid out there that this is what Alabama's been using to execute many men over just the past couple of years here. What does this mean, this ruling right now, for the future of executions then in Alabama and potentially other states too?
Here is what it is not. This court's decision is not a nationwide injunction. It really only applies to Lee's case and to the nitrogen protocol in Lee's case. That means that nitrogen executions can go on in other states, and presumably a different protocol, a different process would be acceptable. So the mere fact that different courts have weighed in differently on this issue shows you that this is not something that should be taken as anything with precedential value or anything that suggests that nitrogen executions are going to go away forever in the United States.
All right, Danny Savalas.
Thank
you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, the Knicks are one win away from winning the NBA championship after completing the biggest comeback in NBA Finals history last night. Look at this. The look on comedian Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, this is all of us. It captured how all of New York was feeling last night. There's Seinfeld when blue and orange took the lead after some unbelievable drama in the final seconds. I mean, shock, disbelief, joy, pandemonium.
It was one of those games it's going to be remembered for generations. The Knicks actually erased a 29-point deficit against the Spurs in front of their own faithful fan base, Jerry Seinfeld and more at MSG. In a moment that could define the series, Spurs player De'Aaron Fox went in for a layup. Instead, he should have just been killing the time because the Spurs had the lead. The hero of the night was OG Anunoby. He blocked that layup, then seconds later tipped in the basket that gave the Knicks the lead with just over 1 second left on the clock. This now gives the Knicks a commanding 3-1 series lead. Knock on wood, not jinxing it here. The series now heads back to Texas for Game 5 with the Knicks on the verge of their first title since 1973. I think there'd be a party in New York if that happened.
I know. It's like, obviously, just, okay, if it's 5, fine. But if it was in 6 and it was at home.
But then you open the door to San Antonio, who can win 3 games in a row. Yeah. They are a very good team, and they might be a little angry.
So excited about this. Like, the bandwagon drove by, and I ran right after it, and I flew on, and now I just can't get enough. Love it so much.
I'm enjoying seeing the color. I'm still a Timberwolves fan, so I have to pledge my loyalty to them. But
okay,
they're not in the finals.
They're not in it, and you live in New York,
of course, I'd like to see the Knicks win. Yes, of course.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.